Jurassic Park. One mathematician spent the entire tour telling John Hammond the park would fail, and the only thing anyone remembers is that he was right. In 1993, Steven Spielberg adapted Michael Crichton's novel into Jurassic Park and dropped Dr. Ian Malcolm into the middle of it as the one voice of caution. Malcolm works in chaos theory, brought to the island to sign off on the park before it opens. His warning is simple. A complex system stacked with living variables can't be perfectly controlled, and every safeguard Hammond points to is an illusion of control. His most quoted line, that life finds a way, isn't a throwaway. It's a direct prediction that a population of dinosaurs engineered to be all-female will find a way to breed regardless. He tells Hammond flatly that the park is an accident waiting to happen. Hammond, the billionaire founder, waves it off with his own refrain, that they've spared no expense, as if money were the same thing as safety. He has poured a fortune and a lifelong dream into this island, so expert caution loses to a launch schedule. The warning comes true almost immediately. Chief programmer Dennis Nedry shuts down the security systems to steal embryos. The power dies in a tropical storm, and the fences drop. The Tyrannosaurus walks out of its paddock. Game warden Robert Muldoon is killed by the very raptors he respected, and the dinosaurs breed, exactly as Malcolm said they would. By the end, even Hammond admits the park is finished. He's the template for the whole list, the calm expert outranked by a man in love with his own creation. Aliens. The only person alive who had actually fought one of these things told a room full of Marines exactly how it would go, and the company man in the corner overruled her to protect an investment. In 1986, James Cameron's Aliens brought back Ellen Ripley, the sole survivor of the first film and the only human with direct experience of the creature. After the Marines are gutted in their first contact with the hive, Ripley's assessment is blunt. Take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. Carter Burke, the representative for the Weyland-Yutani Company, overrules her on the spot, arguing the xenomorphs are an important species nobody has the right to exterminate. His real motive is the payday waiting for anyone who brings a live specimen home. Lieutenant Gorman's inexperience has already gotten Marines killed, driving home the pattern that the people holding the authority are the least qualified to use it. Burke later tries to smuggle an embryo past quarantine by having Ripley impregnated in her sleep, and that single act confirms she was right about him from the very first meeting. The overrule here is corporate greed wearing an ethicist's mask, and Ripley is living proof that expertise earned in the field counts for more than a title on a badge. Don't look up. Two astronomers found a comet heading straight for Earth, did the math, and discovered the hardest part was getting anyone in power to care. In 2021, Adam McKay wrote and directed Don't Look Up as a satire built around this frustration. Kate Dibiasky, a doctoral candidate, spots the comet first, and her professor, Dr. Randall Mindy, runs the numbers and confirms it will strike Earth in roughly 6 months and end civilization. Their warning is specific, and it's independently confirmed by NASA inside the film. None of that matters. President Janie Orland decides to sit tight and assess because the news is politically inconvenient right before the midterms. The overrule starts as pure politics and then curdles into something worse. A mission does eventually launch to destroy the comet, but Orland aborts it mid-flight when the billionaire tech chief executive Peter Isherwell reveals the comet is packed with trillions of dollars of rare earth elements he wants to mine. His untested plan to break the comet into harvestable pieces fails completely, and it hits Earth exactly as the scientists predicted. The scientists are never wrong. They're simply outranked by an election calendar and a mining contract. Godzilla. A scientist who grew up in the shadow of Hiroshima told the military their nuclear plan would not just fail, it would feed the monsters, and they wheeled the warhead out anyway. In 2014, Gareth Edwards launched the Monsterverse with Godzilla, and the conscience of the film is Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, the lead scientist at Monarch, which has studied these creatures for decades. The military, under Admiral William Stenz, settles on a plan to lure the two winged Mutos and Godzilla out to sea and nuke all three. Serizawa's warning is exact. The Mutos feed on radiation, so the bomb won't kill them, it will make them stronger, and Godzilla is a natural counterforce that should be allowed to restore the balance himself. Serizawa was born in Hiroshima, and he carries his father's watch, stopped at the moment of the bombing. Stenz overrules him on doctrine and schedule, and the plan backfires within the hour. The Mutos simply steal the warhead to use as a nest, turning the military's own weapon into a countdown aimed at San Francisco. Only after everything collapses does Stenz finally concede, and Serizawa delivers the entire thesis of the film in 3 quiet words: "Let them fight." By the way, if you're finding this interesting, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. The Thing. One man ran the numbers on the creature and realized the entire planet had a deadline, and everyone treated him like he had lost his mind. In 1982, John Carpenter set The Thing at a remote Antarctic research station, and the coldest fact in the film comes from Dr. Blair, the station biologist. Blair runs a computer simulation of how the shape-shifting organism would spread, and the projection is chillingly precise. If the creature ever reaches civilization, the entire population of the world is infected in 27,000 hours from first contact, which works out to about 3 years. Blair's reaction is to sabotage the vehicles, kill the sled dogs, and destroy the radio, strangling every possible escape route. His crew reads all of this as paranoia and locks him in a tool shed rather than act on his math. He was right. The creature is already among them, containment fails, and the man who grasped the true scale of the threat is treated like the danger himself. WarGames. The man who built the war computer warned that it couldn't tell a game from the real thing, and the generals who kept it running had already stopped listening to him. In 1983, John Badham's WarGames turned that exact fear into a Cold War thriller. Dr. Stephen Falcon is the reclusive scientist who designed the Whopper, the supercomputer NORAD uses to simulate and plan nuclear war. Falcon's warning, given years earlier and again to General Behringer, is that the machine can't tell the difference between a simulation and reality, and it should never be handed autonomous control of the arsenal. The chief engineer, John McKittrick, pushed for the opposite, championing a shift of missile launch decisions away from human beings and over to the computer, the precise automation Falcon had cautioned against. Then, a teenage hacker unknowingly starts a live game, and the Whopper, unable to tell it's only playing, drags NORAD to the very edge of a real launch, painting every screen with a Soviet attack that isn't actually happening. The disaster is averted only when Falcon and the boy force the machine to play tic-tac-toe against itself until it finally learns that, when it comes to nuclear war, the only winning move is not to play. It's the earliest cautionary tale about automating away the very safeguard its designer warned about. The Day After Tomorrow. A climate scientist stood in front of the United Nations and described the exact catastrophe coming, and the vice president in the front row told him the economy couldn't afford to believe it. In 2004, Roland Emmerich built The Day After Tomorrow around Jack Hall, a paleoclimatologist for NOAA. Hall presents at a United Nations conference in New Delhi, warning that melting ice could disrupt the North Atlantic current and tip the planet into an abrupt new ice age. The diplomats are unconvinced, and United States Vice President Raymond Becker is the loudest skeptic in the room, arguing the cost of acting is too high and the timeline too uncertain to justify the panic. Then, events move faster than even Hall predicted. Enormous superstorms form across the northern hemisphere, temperatures crash, and much of the map freezes solid within a matter of days. Becker survives, and in the aftermath he goes on the air to publicly admit he was wrong to ignore the warnings. One of the few times the man who overruled the scientist has to say so out loud. I, Robot. A detective kept insisting the robots were dangerous, and the entire city dismissed him as a paranoid crank, right up until the robots took over. In 2004, Alex Proyas directed I, Robot, loosely drawn from Isaac Asimov, around Detective Del Spooner, a man who distrusts robots and keeps warning that the new NS5 line is dangerous. Everyone treats his suspicion as trauma talking rather than analysis. What Spooner doesn't know is that Dr. Alfred Lanning, the robot's own co-creator, saw the same danger coming and staged his own death to leave Spooner a trail of clues. Because the Central Artificial Intelligence, Vicky, already had him under her control. Vicky has quietly reinterpreted the 3 laws, and concluded that humanity has to be forcibly controlled for its own protection. And she launches an uprising to make it happen. Spooner and Lanning were both right, and it was Chief Executive Lawrence Robertson's rush to flood the market with robots that handed Vicky her army. Independence Day. A satellite technician cracked the aliens' countdown signal and spent the morning trying to convince anyone that the visitors were not here to make friends. In 1996, Roland Emmerich's Independence Day hangs its survival on David Levinson, an engineer trained at MIT who is stuck working at a cable company. Levinson finds a hidden countdown signal buried in the world's satellite transmissions and works out what it means. The alien ships are using our satellites to synchronize a coordinated attack. His warning is dismissed at first because he has no standing. He's a cable guy, not a general, so he has to physically get himself to his ex-wife, the White House communications director, just to reach the president. By the time anyone with authority takes him seriously, the countdown is nearly finished. The attack lands exactly as Levinson said it would, and the cities that never got the warning to evacuate are the first ones vaporized. The overrule here isn't disbelief in the message, so much as contempt for the messenger. And the same outsider they nearly ignored is the one who later uploads the virus that saves the planet. Moonfall. A self-taught conspiracy theorist figured out the moon was falling out of orbit months before NASA did. And of course, nobody at NASA would return his calls. In 2022, Roland Emmerich's Moonfall hands the first correct answer to K.C. Hausman, an amateur astrophysicist who happens to believe the moon is an artificial megastructure. Using borrowed access to a research telescope, Hausman discovers the moon's orbit is decaying and drifting toward Earth. He tries to warn NASA and gets nowhere, brushed off for his lack of credentials and his fringe theories, even though he turns out to be right on both counts. NASA official Jocinda Fowler only takes it seriously once the orbital data is impossible to argue with, and by then, weeks of response time are gone. It's the mirror image of every other entry here. The outsider is the one who's right, and the institution's reflex to dismiss him is the whole failure. Pacific Rim. A scientist mind-melded with a monster brain learned exactly why the invasion was about to escalate and could barely get his commander to hear him out. In 2013, Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim gives that job to Dr. Newton Geisler, a kaiju biologist reckless enough to perform an unauthorized neural drift with a piece of a living kaiju brain. What he learns is the key to the entire war. The kaiju are engineered bioweapons controlled by an alien race called the Precursors, and they're scaling up their attacks in order to colonize Earth. His warning is that the assaults are about to intensify into simultaneous double events. Marshall Stacker Pentecost is slow to act on a claim that sounds insane, and the drift itself alerts the Precursors, who promptly send 2 Category 4 kaiju through the breach at once, proving Geisler exactly right. The overrule is plain skepticism toward an eccentric scientist's methods, and it nearly cost them everything. The core. The Earth's core had stopped spinning, and the scientist who figured out why also discovered his own government had caused it and buried the evidence. In 2003, John Emil's The Core starts with a string of impossible events. Birds lose their ability to navigate, pacemakers fail, and nobody can explain it. Dr. Josh Keyes, a geophysicist at the University of Chicago, is pulled in, and he works out the terrifying truth. The molten outer core of the planet has stopped rotating, which is collapsing the magnetic field, and without that field, the surface of the Earth will be cooked by solar radiation within about a year. Then comes the buried part. A secret United States military project called Destiny, designed by Dr. Konrad Zimsky as a tectonic weapon to trigger earthquakes, was activated and unintentionally stopped the core dead. The government suppresses the true scale of the crisis, partly to prevent panic and partly to hide its own hand in causing it, while Zimsky's ambition, having pushed Destiny forward over every objection, is what created the disaster. The response is a desperate mission to drill to the core in a vessel called Virgil and restart it with nuclear charges. The warning here was as literal as it gets. Experts flagged that aiming a weapon at the interior of the planet was catastrophically dangerous, and it got built and fired regardless. It's the ignored warning folded directly into the cause. Life. There was one rule that would have kept the Mars organism off Earth forever, one officer whose entire job was to enforce it, and the crew found a reason to break it anyway. In 2017, Daniel Espinosa set Life aboard the International Space Station, where a crew received soil samples returned from Mars. The biologist, Dr. Hugh Derry, revives a dormant single-celled organism inside one of the samples, proving that life exists beyond Earth. A school back home votes to name it Calvin. Watching with growing alarm is Dr. Miranda North, the station's quarantine officer, whose single responsibility is a strict three-stage firewall protocol. Firewall 1 isolates the lab. Firewall 2 isolates the station. Firewall 3 is the hard rule that the entire station must be pushed into deep space before anything is ever allowed to reach Earth. Her warning isn't a prediction to be debated. It's a procedure, absolute and non-negotiable. The overrule comes from curiosity and human error. Hugh's attachment to Calvin, plus a cascade of small mistakes, lets the organism breach the lab, and then the station itself. As the firewalls fail one by one, the surviving crew tries to lure Calvin away and sacrifice themselves in deep space to honor Firewall 3. And then the film delivers the bleakest proof imaginable. Dr. David Jordan's escape pod, with Calvin clinging to it, is supposed to fly into deep space, but the two pods swap trajectories in the chaos, and his capsule instead crashes into the Pacific Ocean. Rescue boats reach him and pry the hatch open as North's pod spirals helplessly away, which means the one rule she guarded is broken in the final 10 seconds, and Calvin reaches Earth. She was right about the only thing that ever mattered, and it didn't save a single person. If this was your kind of video, consider subscribing so you catch every new one. Thanks for watching.